I'd like to welcome everyone to our Spotlight webinar series. Today we'll bring the content that we normally deliver to you in person online via Zoom. We miss seeing you this year and like many other years, where we come in person to a conference room near you. But this year we get to have people from all over the country and all over the world join us today, as many registrations were from out of our service territory. I am Ross Treelevin, the Executive Vice President of Sprague Pest Solutions, and I'll serve as your host today. Before we get into today's presentation, please mark your calendars for our upcoming sessions on roof rats, where Bobby Corrigan will be joining us. Guidance on the experts to overcome the challenge. That's July 22nd at 10 a.m. Pacific. On August 5th at 10 a.m. Pacific, we're going to be mitigating the threat of invasive birds. And on August 19th at 10 o'clock Pacific, we're going to have our innovations in pest management, technological advancements to improve your pest management and food safety programs. Please make sure you take a minute and register for those when you have a moment. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Judy Lazaro. She is the Senior Category Director of Food Safety for AIB International, and our session today is Audit Compliance, Evaluating Your IPM Program. I encourage you to submit your questions via the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen throughout today's presentation. And now, without further ado, let me turn it over to Judy.
Thank you, Ross. And I'm going to get my screen. And while we're making this quick transfer, can you see my screen, Ross?
Absolutely.
Perfect. And I will, when I started my career many years ago, I started in the West Coast as a food safety inspector. So I probably have been in many of your plants. So if I haven't, I hope I get to see you someday. And if I have, well, yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's been a long time. So, and again, I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you, especially talking about something that I'm pretty passionate about, and that's audit compliance, evaluating your IPM program. And the reason why I'm pretty passionate about it is, let me give you a real scenario. Here's what happens on an AIB inspection or any inspection. So there's a rodent problem at the facility, and you immediately call your pest control service provider and say, you're fired. You know what? There's rodents in my plant and it's your fault. Even though every door in the facility is wide open, even though your pest control service provider has written that up, even though, do you guys see where I'm going with this? See, it's not about pest control, it's about integrated pest management. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about what you can do to truly enhance your integrated pest management program. I did hear that you have another speaker coming up, and that's Bobby Corrigan. If you have not marked your calendars, please do so. I've yet to see anybody that can speak with as much passion as Mr. Corrigan. So really and truly, if you haven't marked your calendar, please do it. I'm telling you, you'll learn so much in an amazing, with an amazing presenter. Before I get started, I want to share with you, if I can, move my screen. There we go. I promise I'm not going to do a commercial for AIB International. I promise that's not what I'm going to do. What I want to do, though, is share just the second point in our mission statement. And it says, equipping our clients with knowledge. And that's really what I hope we can do. We're going to move quickly. It's definitely a fast-paced presentation, but I hope we can make this really where you say, boy, that was value added. You know what? I need to work differently with my service provider. I really hope that's what you'll get out of the end of this. And at the end of this, if I've done that, then I feel like I've done exactly what AIB International has intended all of our staff to do, and that's equip you with knowledge. So I have on my desk, and I've had this since 2013. It sits here on my desk and has for 7 years. And I'm going to start with sharing this. And we had FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, come out, and everybody got nervous in the industry and said, what do we have to do to get ready? What do we need to do to prepare for this? What can we expect from this new Food Safety Modernization Act? And the reason why I keep it is I think there's 2 points that were made in this article. One, it says, go back to the basics. Critically evaluate the manufacturing facility to be sure you have strong foundational elements of food safety in place. Sanitation, which Bobby Corrigan's going to tell you when you join him, he'll say sanitation is pest control. Sanitation, allergen control, and GMP compliance. So really, the best advice to prepare for regulatory is to go back to the basics. The best advice that I can give you to prepare for any inspection, go back to the basics. And then what do you do when you go back to the basics? Well, the article says this too: train, train, and train. conduct refresher training on your food safety practices, and then you truly will be ready for you can pass any inspection if you always go back to the basics. You can also eliminate so many pest issues from your facility if you simply go back to the basics. So having said all that, let's take a look at these GMPs, which have been referenced. What are the good manufacturing practices? Well, what they really are is, if you put up the word why, W-H-Y, it's really what the GMPs are. Why do we wear a hairnet? Because we don't want hair to fall in the food. Why are we concerned with standing water on the outside of the facility? Why are we concerned about that? Because it attracts pests. See, everything we do, the why is answered with the good manufacturing practice. So I always tell people it's the answer to the test. I mean, it really is the answer to the test. Good manufacturing practices. And if you look at it, you're saying, well, Judy, I don't see integrated pest management anywhere. I don't see that up there. Well, guess what? It's in this section, 117.35 is where you're going to learn about pest control. And again, remember I said Bobby's going to tell you the same thing? Sanitation is pest control. And it's not by accident that the pest control section of the good manufacturing practices is 117.35. Now, you can go to fda.gov, go to their website and search the data. And that's what I'm going to show you. And you don't have to try and read the screen. It's not intended for you to read the screen. But here's what the data looks like if you pull all the data off of FDA's website. And what the data that I'm trying to find is, what are the top issues that FDA is finding when they come into your facility? What are they seeing? Well, it starts with this, and then we clean it up a little bit. And then when we're done, here's the top 5. So these are the top 5 issues, okay? The top 5 issues that FDA is finding when they come into your food establishment. And again, I have all the raw data for you if you want to go through it. All I'm telling you is I've done the heavy lifting, sorted it for you. And if you look at it, personnel is number 1. Number 2 is, my goodness gracious, look at that. Number 2 is pest control. But let's go back to personnel for 1 second. So when we say personnel have no influence at all in the pest control program at the facility, right? Wrong, right? Remember I said about all the doors being wide open? Guess what? If all those doors are wide open, guess where that infraction gets written up? Under personnel. It can also get written up under the 4th bullet point, which says plant construction and design, which means the facility is not tightly sealed from pests. What about the 3rd bullet point, sanitation, allergen, and process verification? I already said sanitation is pest control. So I share this with you because if you're single focused, and when you think about pest control, if the only thought that comes into your mind is the service provider, you're already making a mistake. And the bigger mistake that we make is, again, we hold the service provider accountable for any issue that has to do with a pest, when we need to step back and say, okay, what's really the root cause analysis? Because again, if all the doors in the facility are wide open, you really can't point your finger at the pest provider and say, it's your reason, it's your fault that I have rodents in my facility. Is it really? So again, I want you to take the blinders off, and let's start looking at some of the fundamental and the basics. Personnel, pest control, sanitation, plant construction, and then the equipment itself. Those are the top 5 issues on FDA. If you looked at this data from 5 years ago, okay, from 5 years ago, if you looked at the same FDA data from 5 years ago, guess what you'll find? Pest control is again in the top 3. So it is a huge issue for the industry. It's not going away. And again, let's not, it's because, again, the service provider. Remember, let's take our blinders off just a little bit. So here's what the GMPs say, 117.35, sanitary facility and controls. And again, you can read the whole thing. All I'm going to point out is what's in yellow. It says effective measures must be taken to exclude pests. And you have a responsibility to protect against the contamination of food. So you can read everything else, but that's really what's critical. So now, how can you make sure that your facility is doing that? Or should I ask you, can you make sure that your facility is doing that? Well, you can. And you can do it with 2 things. 1 is the inspection, and 2 is the audit. Now, let's be clear. We use these 2 terms like they're interchangeable, like an inspection and an audit is the same thing. And I'm guilty. I do it myself. I use them interchangeably. But they're 2 very distinctly different things. An inspection, for example, is that real time. It's that physical. Let's go out and find the issue. Let's go out and find the rodent problem in the facility. Let's go out and find the peeling paint, for example. That's the physical inspection. But when we find that, we ask ourselves one question. We say, what program allowed that condition to exist? So for example, if I found rodents in the facility, I shouldn't just be saying there's a rodent problem and writing it up. See, that's only the symptom. Let's step back and do root cause analysis and say, what really is the issue that allowed this rodent problem to exist? And that's what we call the audit. And the beauty of these two things, although we use them interchangeably, one leads to the other, which leads to the other. So an inspection finding becomes an audit finding, which becomes an inspection finding, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we use a simple process at AIB, and it's how we train our audit staff, and we call it the concept of ICE. Identify a problem, control a problem, and eliminate a problem. And it works phenomenally well when you do your own self-inspections. What we're really good at, when I say we, I mean you doing a self-inspection and the AIB inspectors as well, we're really good at identifying the problem, right? It's very easy to go out there and find roof leaks, for example. We're pretty good at controlling the problem. Well, we need to put up a tarp, right? Because we got a roof leak, we need to protect the product, we put up a tarp. But have we solved the problem? And the E is the hardest thing to do, and it's one of the things we forget about, but I'm telling you, you have not done a really good inspection and audit if you haven't solved I, C, and the E. Okay, hugely important. Now the AIB standards, again, available to you free of charge, free of charge. They have 20% of the standard is a section called Integrated Pest Management, 20%. Now, if what you're doing with your service provider, your pest control service provider, is at the end of an AIB inspection, if the only thing you're doing is handing them that section on integrated pest management, you're already doing them a disservice. Because I've already showed you that open doors, for example, influence pests. And open doors do not fall in the section called integrated pest management. They fall under operational. Or if the doors aren't sealing because they're damaged, it falls under maintenance. So if the only thing you're doing is giving your service provider, here's the AIB report, here's the section on pest control, you're responsible for it, you're not doing yourself, nor are you doing the pest control service provider a service. So what will really help Sprague, for example, is if you give them the entire AIB inspection report or your customer report and let them, and highlight if you want, the ones that you know that you need to take responsibility for. You need to make sure the door's tightly sealed, for example. Okay, so I'm sharing the standards with you. Again, you should get them. They're free of charge. I'll put them right in your mailbox if you need them, but don't look at them with those blinders on again. Okay. Again, how do you prepare for one of these inspections, whether it's an AIB inspection or a customer inspection? I remember going into a factory many years ago, and I thought he was this real big soccer star because he had posters all over the place that said goal, G-O-A-L. And he had nets, and I thought, wow, he's really big into this soccer. I really thought that because he had soccer balls and everything. And then, after an hour or so walking with him, I said, are you a soccer fan? He goes, no, I never played, never watched the sport. I thought, oh, so I haven't figured it out yet. So then I finally said, what is it with all of these goals everywhere? And he said, oh no, he said, it means get out and look. G-O-A-L, get out and look. He said, that's what I expect my leadership team to do every day, is to get out and look. And that's probably the best advice that I can give all of you, is to get out and look. Go out in your facility and truly evaluate it from a pest control. I mean, imagine for 1 second that you're a rodent. I know it sounds crazy, but imagine for 1 second that you're the neighborhood cat and you want to get into the facility. I mean, just look at it through a different lens and you'll be shocked at how many openings you have in the facility, how much spillage you have on the floor. When was the last time, for example, y'all went on the roof? Right? Think about it. And this is how you have to challenge yourself to look at your factory a little bit different. At least get through the entire facility once a month, at least once a month. And remember, when you go through the facility, don't just go out there and do the I and identify, control, and eliminate. Don't just go out there and find things wrong. Make it educational. Go over to the operator and say, hey, I want to make sure you keep these doors closed. And I know it's hot in here, But it's worse if we're hot and we have a squirrel in the facility. So let's keep the doors closed. And if we really need to, we'll put a screened insert in here if that's something you think we can help with. So have this dialogue and have this discussion with your employees in the workforce. Okay, don't just go out there and find things wrong and generate a list. And that's unfortunately what we're doing way too many of. So identify it, control it, and eliminate. And that's also how you've all heard about the term change of food safety culture. One of the best ways to change a food safety culture is take the time and explain the GMPs, which means you explain the why. Because some of it's very simple. Why do we put on a hairnet? Well, that's kind of simple, isn't it? But let me ask you a harder one. Why do we keep product away from the wall? I mean, really, why? Why do we keep things away from the wall? Because if you just take that extra minute and say, look, we want to keep things away from the wall because one, it's easier to clean. Two, it's where we keep all of our rodent control devices. You know, if you take that one extra minute and explain that, your employees are more likely going to go, oh, yeah, now I get it. If all you're going to do is just train, what I mean by train is you just repetitively say it over and over and over again, they're going to do it as long as you're watching. But if you take the time and educate, explain the why, you'll see your employees will always do it. All right. So now let's go back to the GMPs. Let me ask you this question. This is a facility. This is actually a facility in Fresno, California. So I purposely put in some pictures that, you know, it probably has some familiarity to you. It may or may not, but I tried to put in some West Coast pictures. But this is a facility in the Central Valley or Fresno, California area. And ask yourself this. Remember, the GMPs say effective measures need to be in place to control pests. Do you think that's effective? Having a whole bunch of material, you know, what we call the boneyard. So what you want to do, now I'm not saying you can never have a boneyard at your facility. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is if you do have a boneyard, make sure you store things up off the ground. Let your service provider, let Sprague know, hey, I got a boneyard in the back area. And you know why? He or she may want to go out there and put some additional traps out there. They want to include that on their service visit. They want to go and check these areas. And you know what? When you do your self-inspections, you want to do the same thing. And if you are going to keep a boneyard, try and keep it as far away from the facility as you possibly can. And if that's not possible, at least keep it away from the door side of your facility. What I mean by that is I go into facilities still and they have their 50 receiving doors and then they have the boneyard right in front of door number 25. That's just dangerous. That's just creating a risk. So try and eliminate that risk. So again, walk through your facility and ask those hard questions. Here's another picture I share with you. And this is a high fructose corn syrup line. And you're looking at that and you're saying, oh yeah, they would fail an AIB inspection because of the bees. And you're almost right. They would fail an AIB inspection, but guess what? It's not going to get written up in pest control. That section called integrated pest management, that's not where we would write this issue up. So if you're only giving your inspection report the one section on pest control, your service provider is never going to know that there's a bee problem on the outside of the facility. And the reason why, remember the I, we've identified the issue. We've identified it. We say the issue is the high fructose corn syrup is uncapped and it leaks on the ground. So we can control it by cleaning it and capping it, right? But have we eliminated the problem? Probably not, because we still have spillage on the gravel. Do you think it's easy to clean gravel? Do you think it's really easy to get this syrup out of gravel? Probably not. So you know what we would write this item up? More than likely, this item would be written up under maintenance, because what's the root cause analysis? It's a maintenance issue. We want them to do a better job in this area so it's easier to clean, okay? Or maybe it would be written up under operational practices, people practices, because the employees aren't taking the time to cap the line. But what I can tell you it won't be written up under is pest control. And that's why you cannot rely on just integrated pest management, 20% of the consolidated standards. So many other things influence the success of that category. This next slide, I unfortunately see it all the time. I really do. And I always say, thank you so much for inviting me into your facility. It's gracious of you to prop the door open and allow me to come in. And the truth is, this is something that we still see very, very frequently. And when you look at something like this is a bigger issue than, you know, what you typically see. And why do you think it's a bigger issue? Because they actually have a device that somebody has brought and put next to the door. So it's always going to be propped. So now you say, well, what's the root cause analysis here, Judy? Get rid of that little piece of metal. Do you think that's going to solve the problem? Again, you've identified it, you've controlled it, but have you really eliminated the problem? And does this open door, does it have any impact at all on your pest control? I mean, what do you think? But again, if there's a lot of flies in this area, let's say this goes into that high fructose corn syrup area, and there's a lot of flies in that area, what do? We blame the service provider. What we need to do is say, okay, and the service provider absolutely should be writing this up on those service reports, okay? But what we need to do is we need to look inward and say, all right, we need to do a better job at our facility. So use your service provider as your partner and your coach, and I always say, and your mentor, because you are paying them for their expertise. So allow them to teach, train, and educate you. And let me give you an example where I can tell you you're absolutely underutilizing your service provider. So one thing we do is all the incoming material comes into our facility, and we do, as you can see the gentleman on the screen, he's doing a fantastic job of a self-inspection. He's looking, he's checking it out, and what you see on the screen is the incoming inspection log, and you can see it says insects and rodents. And here's a couple more. These are two of them that are from another facility. One of them, you can see it says pest activity. One up here says infestation. And one over here says including pests. So you can see we're saying one of the most important people that we have in our facility is the receiver. And the reason why is that receiver is the gatekeeper, if you will. He or she is going to make sure everything that comes into this facility is pest-free, right? How much training have you done with that receiver? How much training have you really done? I mean, I know when I went to school, it was a long time ago, I learned reading, I learned writing, I learned arithmetic. I didn't learn rodent dropping identification. I didn't learn anything about stored product pests. So what I would challenge you is take advantage and partner with your pest management professional and have them come in and do 5-minute toolbox talk with your receivers. And they'll even be gracious enough, I know it sounds crazy, but they'll even bring in some stored product insects if that's your primary pest. They'll show you what rodent droppings look like. But if you're giving this receiver this much responsibility to make a decision like this quickly, and decide if I should bring in all that flour or not, don't you think you want to provide them with the training so he or she can do their job to the best of their ability? And for those bakeries out there or snack food plants or any facility that uses this is a sifter. And again, the way a sifter works, you remember, the flour goes through a screen and then it goes into this little bucket. And I'll show another picture, this little bucket right here, and that's called tailings. And what do we generally see in tailings? Well, we see some hard flour, but we also see flour beetles. We also see flat grain beetles. We also see sawtooth grain beetles. Now, I'm listing a whole bunch of insects. Does it make a difference if you're getting sawtooth grain beetles and your employees are identifying them as flour beetles? Is that important? You bet it is. Okay, if you don't know the insect, you're not going to be able to control the pest. So if all you're doing is anytime you find an insect in the flour beetle, in the tailing bucket, is you identify it as a flour beetle, you're already at a disadvantage for eliminating that problem from your facility. So what I would encourage you to do is, you know what, have your pest management professional be your partner. Okay, have them join you on an inspection and be your partner, and actually have them look at the tailing along with you. I put on this page an inspector's tip, and I'm going to share some inspection tips with you as we go. If you're doing any type of facility that has a sifter, if you're the plant manager, or you're the pest management professional, you are absolutely not doing yourself a service if you are not reading, and I truly mean reading, what's inside of that bucket, because it'll tell you if you have an insect problem, it'll tell you if you have a supplier issue. I mean, everything you want to know about that raw material is inside of that tailing bucket. So make sure you're taking advantage of the expertise that you have on site, and that's that pest management professional. How about this picture? Is this effective? Are we effectively keeping pests out of the facility? Remember I said you want to keep, if I said, how many inches do we have to keep it away from the wall? Everybody's going to shout out a number. They're going to say 18 inches, Judy. It's got to be 18 inches. Now, here's the funny thing. You're never going to find 18 inches in the GMPs. It's not in there. You're not going to find it in the AIB standards. Not in there. And the reason why is the intent. It doesn't matter if it's 17 inches, it's still effective. If it's 24 inches, it's still effective. But if it's right up against the wall like this, it's not effective. Because what we want to have is unrestricted access to that floor and that wall junction, when that floor and that wall come together. Because remember, it's a difficult area to clean. And where do your rodents travel? You're going to learn about this from Bobby. I mean, now there's so much more than just a picture, because the rodents, everybody thinks they only travel along the floor wall junction. And that's not the case. But they're very likely going to travel along a floor wall junction. So they use those long whiskers and they touch that wall as they make their travel. Where do you have all your pest control devices, your rodent control devices? Along the floor wall junction. So what happens when you put a pallet just like this up against the wall? Now that rodent is going to travel and you've given him a new floor wall junction. Okay, so now he's going to travel away from the wall. Do you have mouse traps 5 or 6 feet away from your wall? Probably not. Okay, and that's how you get a rodent in your facility. So again, I can't say it enough. Bobby is a fantastic presenter, and he'll give you much more detail than I ever could with one picture. Okay, here's an inspector tip for you when you're in your facility. You may not have time to walk and look at every single pallet in your raw material warehouse or your finished goods warehouse. You may not have the time to do the good, thorough inspection that you want. So here's a tip for you. Look for age. What we encourage our inspectors to do, we encourage them to look for things that are more than 4 weeks old. Why is that? Anybody want to take a guess out there? You can type it in. 4 weeks old, insect susceptible. That's correct, insect susceptible. And we look for what you see on the screen. We look for dusty, dirty pallets, what we call slow moving stock. So if you take a look at this picture, you can see it's been sitting there for a long time. You can even see they've been sweeping around it. So if I'm an inspector, guess what I'm going to take a look at? That pallet right there, those pallets right there. You know what you should look at? The same thing. So again, use your indicators, go into that facility and take the blinders off and say, okay, if I'm a pest and I want to get into this facility, what pallet do I want to hide in? Oh, probably the one that, over there that hasn't moved in 6 months. That's probably the one. That's the one you want to take a good hard look at. Okay. Here's another inspector tip for you. It's one thing, especially the technicians, the pest management professionals, you go into so many different facilities. You cannot expect to be an expert in flour milling. You can't expect to be an expert in carbonated soft drinks. You can't expect to be an expert in the snack food industry. So what we encourage our AIB inspectors, what we encourage them to do is we say follow indicators like old product. We also say pay attention to things like handles, doorknobs, latches, because you know what that means? It means open me. All right. And what you want to do, don't just arbitrarily open things in the facility. Make sure you have permission. But when you look at something like this is a flour system. This is part of a flour mill. You would say, may I open this? And when you would open that, you would see there's ledges. And all you do is knock some of that flour off. And guess what you're going to find? Insects. Okay. So, and if they're doing everything right, and hopefully this particular facility was doing everything right, they won't have the insects. But what you want to do as your career continues, whether you've been doing it a year or 20 years or 30 years or 50 years, if you follow this, and you'll continue to always learn something by seeing how equipment operates. So little inspector tip for you. Here's a roof leak. You can see a roof leak that's been there for a long time. It's starting to mix even with the oil from this oil fryer, this stack. And let me ask you this. Do you think this facility is protecting against contamination? Do you think there's any potential at all that there might be, oh, let's say cockroaches in the ceiling? Oh, maybe fruit flies in the ceiling. Oh, maybe rodents in the ceiling, in this drop ceiling. So again, when you see things like this as a pest control professional, when you see this, you need to write it down. Don't think, oh, it's just a roof leak. That doesn't really have any impact on me. I always tell the pest management professional, over-report. Over-report, over-report, because you're doing them a favor, because what you don't want is the FDA investigator to come in and see that and then write that up. Because what you want to do is say, hey, while I was out there, give them that value add. Hey, I noticed when I was out there, even though it's not really, it's not in the area I was looking at, I noticed there was a roof leak. And I just want you guys to be aware of it. So pass that information forward. That is truly value add. How about this picture? If you've never worked in a bakery or a plant that has flour, you have no idea what that is. Let's say you work in a beverage plant. You have no idea what that is. But if you work in a bakery, you better know what that is. And the reason why, those squiggly lines that you're seeing, typically they're stored product pests. So again, if I'm doing a service at any facility that has something like this, I'm educating the workforce. I'm educating my employees, and I'm saying, hey, if you see these squiggly lines, let me know. If I'm the pest control professional and I'm seeing those squiggly lines, I better be reacting, okay? Because that is an indication of a pest. Whether it's a stored product pest, maybe it's an ant. In some instances, it may even just be a vibration in the flour. It may not be a pest at all. But you know what that squiggly line tells me? It means investigate, okay? It always means investigate. Okay, so make sure you train your employees. Make sure they know what that squiggly line means. It means do something about it. Here's an inspector tip for you. And you're thinking, wow, Judy, all I see is a pile of trash in a warehouse. How can that possibly be an inspector tip? Well, there's two areas that I always encourage you if you're doing an inspection, which means you doing your self-inspection and the pest management professional doing an inspection. Two areas never walk by, okay? One is a floor drain, and the other is a pile of dirt that you see sitting in a floor like this. And the reason why is that means they've swept this whole area and they have it in a little pile for me to look at. Just like the floor drain, everything gets washed in that little basket in the floor drain for me to look at. Because let's say I go over there and I start looking at it and I find a couple of rodent droppings. I know without doing much inspection, I know there's rodent activity in this room. If I go over to a floor drain, for example, and I look in the floor drain and I find a piece of glass in a facility that has a no glass policy, I know there's a significant failure of a program somewhere in this room. So again, we see people will inspect vacuum cleaners for the same reason. What they're trying to do is they're trying to read the indicator. So again, don't walk by this. In fact, quite the opposite. When I see this, I light up. I'm like a kid in a candy store. It's like, oh, you've done all this work for me. Okay. Now this next picture, hard to see. So we're in a carbonated soft drink plant. And this is in the middle of the processing area. Can everybody see what's in that picture right there? Can you all see it? If you look really close, I'm giving you a hint. It's got that long antenna. All right. So you can look at it and you say, yeah, how am I supposed to see that, Judy, on a self-inspection? I mean, look how hard it was for us to find it in a picture, right? So how are you supposed to see that in a self-inspection? Well, let me ask you a question. Who is more likely going to find this? The employee, the operator that stands near this piece of equipment 8, 10, 12 hours a day? Or you going out once a month doing your self-inspection? Or your pest control professional who comes in once a week? Who is more likely going to find this problem? The operator, right? Seriously, the operator. Who's more likely going to find the raccoon that comes in at 10 o'clock at night? Who's going to find the cat that comes in at 4 in the morning? It's going to be your employees. So what you need to do is encourage, absolutely encourage, invite them to fill out what's called the Pest Citing Log. Make this a positive thing for them. If I asked you right now and said, where in your facility is your pest citing log? Some of you, half of you, I bet, are going to say, it's in my binder. It's in my pest control binder. Do all of your employees know where that binder's kept? Probably not. So if you're keeping it in your pest control binder book, you're probably keeping it there to satisfy an inspector and not using it to the full capability. If you say, yes, we have one hanging in our locker room, we have one hanging in our break room, we have one hanging in the receiving warehouse, then that tells me you're absolutely using it for all its good intention. Now, a little tip for you, if you do have a customer coming in, or you do have FDA that comes in, you probably don't want these hanging up where any visitor can go over and say, oh, so you have a rodent problem in the warehouse. So just be very selective on where you put these, okay? Just keep that in mind. You want to make them accessible to all of your employees, but you also don't want all your visitors to take a good look at them. But I tell you this because if you have a facility that's got 200 employees, I am telling you, you have 200 pest management professionals. If you have 300 employees, you have 300 pest management professionals. So my point is, encourage your employees. In fact, a very large company that I inspected many years ago, they used to incentivize it. When anybody would fill something out on the pest citing log, they would give them lottery tickets. And I thought, wow, what a neat idea. They give them a lottery ticket. And the reason why they did that is they encouraged the employees to say, hey, there's some squiggly lines out there by the bee mixer. Hey, I saw something run underneath the pallet last night. Don't know what it was. Or it was bigger than a house, I don't know what it was, but I saw it, it ran under the pallet. So they're encouraging because they'd rather find out from the workforce than find out from an inspector, find out from FDA, okay? So if you're not using your pest citing log, you can see Sprague makes them available to you. I strongly encourage you to take a good hard look at it. Okay, so what's working now in the age of COVID? What's hot? What am I seeing in the industry right now that's really hot? Well, a lot of virtual training, as you can understand. We're doing a lot of virtual training. We're even doing hybrid inspections. I'll talk about that in just a second. But the training that is really, really very helpful right now is what we're doing. It's called How to Do a Self-Inspection, only it's much longer than this. And we even do pictures from your facility. So we'll try and customize it to your facility. It has definitely been one of our hot products. So again, work with your pest professional and see if you can work in partnership and maybe create something on your own. Also, the food safety culture is another very popular web series, a webinar. And again, how do you know if you have a good food safety culture? Well, there's some ways to know if you don't have a good food safety culture. For starters, if you're always doing announced inspections, you need that prep time to get ready for an inspection. Probably don't have a food safety culture. Okay, if all you're doing it when you get your inspection is you're treating it as we fix that, we fix that, we fix that, we fix that, great, we've done well. If you're using it just as a punch list, probably don't have that food safety culture. But if you're going out there faithfully and you're training your employees and you're educating your employees on the whys of what they're doing and you're being very transparent and trustworthy, you probably have a good food safety culture. So again, it's a very popular webinar series. I'd encourage you to look at it. The whys of the GMPs. So I've mentioned it, but there's so many sections of the GMPs we forget. We think the GMPs are only personnel. So in case you forgot, it's so much more. That first slide that I shared with you on the good manufacturing practices, if you're a leader at the facility, if you're a food safety leader, you should understand what each and every one of those means. Not that you have to memorize it, but you have to understand it because it truly is the answer to the food safety test. Whatever that test is, the GMPs will always be the answer. And then the other thing is the pest management professional. So in the age of this COVID, we've seen a lot of pest control companies that have done a fantastic job partnering with the facilities and looking at records, for example, remotely when it was not safe to go into the facility. Let's do some things remote. So let's do some training. Let's do some virtual training. So remember, take advantage of Sprague. Talk to them and say, hey, what can we do to extend our partnership? I like what I'm hearing. What can we do to help? How can you help me? Don't be afraid to reach out. And then the last thing that I want to just touch on is the hybrid inspection. And that is when we do a GMP inspection, like the AIB inspection, and we break it into two parts. And what we do is the desktop first, And you're seeing the GFSI schemes are doing the same thing, where we do some of it first. And then when it's safe to travel into these facilities again, we'll return and do that physical inspection. So it's called a hybrid GMP inspection. It is very, very successful. I'll tell you one of the real benefits to it. It's very interactive. I mean, it's truly very interactive. And social distancing is absolutely enforced, but you can invite other plants to participate. So let's say you're the Fresno plant and you want the Ontario, California plant to join. You can do it without putting them on an airplane. Maybe you want 10 plants to go through one inspection. You can do it without putting anybody on an airplane. It also doesn't interrupt your production. We're not shutting down anything. It's really a very, very effective way of evaluating your food safety program. And, oh yeah, by the way, there's always that thing of cost. I mean, who would think of that? But it's less travel. So it's a great thing to think about. If you have questions, always reach out to me. If you need support from me, always reach out. Food safety is not proprietary. Remember what I'm saying. Food safety is not proprietary. If you need a copy of the standards, if you need help in your facility, please don't hesitate to reach out and give me a call. Let me close by just saying this. If you truly want to change the culture and you want to really empower your workforce and really get them to the next level, whatever that level is, make sure you explain the whys. Take the time and explain the whys. It's called educating. If you want to just have people repetitively do things, it's called training. And I always remind people and say, what do we do with a dog when we say sit, 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 right? What we're doing is we're training the dog. We're not educating the dog, we're training the dog, right? People don't learn that way. People have to be educated. People come to work generally to do the absolute best they can. I mean, yeah, we might all kind of complain now and again about we don't like this and we don't like that. But when we're out having, you know, a beer with our neighbor, we're talking about how great the company is that we work for. Let's be honest. All right. We come to work to do the best we possibly can. So educate me more, be transparent with me, keep teaching me, and I will always give you 110%. And you'll find that's what most of your employees will say. Guys, it's been a difficult time right now with all that's going on with COVID. This is the time we have to do this. We have to pivot. We have to adapt. We have to survive. And let's let this COVID experience get us better. Let's thrive from the experience. And don't forget the concept of ICE, okay? Identify, control, and eliminate. So what questions can I answer for you?
Well, there's been quite a few that have come up here as we've gone through. How does somebody sign up for a hybrid inspection?
So you can reach out to me, and I notice we're not sharing that. So I'm going to give you my email address. It's J Lazaro, first initial, last name, JLAZARO. And that's my fault for not putting it on the screen. And it's one word now. It's at aibinternational.com. So just the company name, aibinternational.com. If you send me an email, I will personally take care of it. You can also go to our website, which is AIB International, www.aibinternational.com. It's a great question. Thank you for that, Ross.
No problem. Somebody else asked, E. James asked, would the AIB audit this year be a desk audit?
Well, it depends how you've set it up. So you have a choice. You can still do an on-site inspection, and it's entirely up to the company. You can do an on-site where we do the entire inspection, what I call the traditional AIB inspection, or you can say, you know what, we're going to do the hybrid inspection, which is the records are done first, and then we return within 6 months, and we do that second portion unannounced. So it really depends on the company, and that's something that you can decide how you want it done. At the end of it, you get the same AIB certificate because it is still a very thorough AIB inspection.
Awesome. Okay. Now, somebody else asked, just staying on that same piece about how to do a hybrid. Has anyone done a hybrid inspection? What was kind of your first one like, Judy, the first time you did a hybrid? Maybe you could give somebody an example of how that looked.
Yeah, I will. I've done many myself. I would tell you if I'm guessing, and I'm truly guessing, so please don't say Judy said, I would guess probably 30 to 40% of what we're doing right now are actually hybrid inspections. Because you all see the map of the United States, for example, there's a lot of red on that map right now. So there's a lot of facilities, probably many of yours are saying, no, we're not ready to have you come in, but we need to get an inspection done. Or we want an inspection done because you know what, we want to make sure the culture of food safety stays. So what, you know, the first couple that you do, I tell everybody, bring your patients. And what I mean by that is, you know, you have to get used to the computer. So most of the time you show records on the screen, but you end up where it's like somebody's joining, and you all see that Geico commercial that's out there where everybody starts joining and they're, hello, are you there? Are you there? We have to go through 10 minutes of that when we get started. So bring your patience, because the first 10 minutes or so are just people popping in the screen. It's a little inconvenient, but after the first 10, maybe 15 minutes, it's actually pretty smooth sailing. But occasionally you'll get some interruptions. So, people will unmute, ask a question, and forget to mute again. So you have to, you forget that you're in a room full of people. So I always tell people, I talk to them and I say, just make sure you're patient.
Yes,
But
we've
they
all
work
played.
very, very well, Ross.
Well, good. We've all played a little bit of Zoom bingo where we realize we're talking
Right.
and we're not on mute. And
That's what it is. Yeah.
my daughter
Yep.
walks in the room, whatever happens.
Yeah,
We're all
that's
learning
right.
this. And some of our standard trainings that we have done in person for many years with clients, we've had to move to this. But when we move to Zoom, we get a recording, or whoever we're training gets a recording afterwards for those who miss, and for those who can't be there for things afterwards, which I think works out pretty well.
It really does. And I think if you're afraid to take advantage of it, don't be afraid. Call and at least talk, and I'll talk you through the pros and the cons. Because again, there's a lot of pros, but there's also some cons, and probably the biggest one is the interruptions.
Absolutely. What are some of the best online trainings you recommend?
I think my personal, I'm being very, my bias,
Absolutely.
of course. I think the best one right now is the whys of the GMP. It's actually something new for AIB. It's done this year. I think it's one of the best ones, because I think we do so much training in the GMPs that we've lost sight of the education. Again, standing water is a simple example, but it's a great example. We say to people, you can't have standing water, you can't have standing water. But then I challenge somebody and say, well, why not? And you can see the eyes look down. I'm not really sure, because it says so in the standards. That's not good enough. Why do we have to keep things away from the wall? One of the ones that I always challenge the food safety professionals at the plant with, food grade lubricant. It's dripping in the product, and the first thing people say, but it's food grade. So what's the difference between a food grade lubricant and a non-food grade lubricant? The answer is in the GMPs. So my personal favorite, especially this year, is the whys of the GMPs. I think it's just a fantastic series.
I think that's great too. I know there's some questions about the webinar series. We'll put a link there in the for the future ones. We'll put a link of those in the notes, and there'll be one that comes out on the follow-up email that comes out from this. And then, of course, your email address was just put in the chat window, or the Q&A window here by Mark Krauster, which is great.
Thank you so much.
And of course, the whys of GMPs has just been put in the chat window, or the Q&A window as well. So those things should have links here for those who are paying attention to the Q&A window. We had a compliment here from Jennifer Sweeney, say, not a question, but you're so entertaining, Judy. Great talk and some awesome examples.
Well, thank you for that. It's only sad that I have to show my face, because so many years I've done webinars and they could never see me. And I'd say, oh, well, I'm 6'1", I'm stunning. I'm 22 years old, I'm stunning. And then people meet me and they're so disappointed. So
That's so funny, Judy. Yes, it's a new time, and now we're all worried about our lighting, and that's what we always work on Zoom. Markesh said, thanks a lot, madam, for better clarity regarding the hybrid inspection. So that was another one that was sent in. And then, there's where can we access the whys of GMPs? There's a link that's just been, I'll copy and paste that into there as well, of how you can get to that right there on the AIB International website. And of course, your email address has been put in there. Kind of last call for questions here. Is there anything else that anyone would like us to answer in the chat? Go ahead and drop it in the Q&A, and we'd be happy to stay on until all the questions are answered.
Well, Ross, at the beginning, I challenged everybody and said, my job is to equip you with knowledge. And I hope I've done that. I really do. Because again, I hope there was some value, and I hope you'll look at your facility just a little bit differently. And equally important, I hope you look at your pest control service provider. I hope you look at Sprague as a partner, an ally, and a mentor, because they're phenomenal teachers and trainers if you look at them a little bit differently.
Thanks, Judy. Our partnership has been really, as my dad would say, we're in the people business, and that is really about our relationships with each other and how we're going to figure some of these problems out together. Uh, Another one from E. James, would you have to reach out to be audited, or will AIB contact us? He asks.
Regarding the hybrid,
You know, it doesn't,
you would
yeah,
have to set it up in advance. So the inspector would never come in and do a hybrid if it wasn't requested. So if it
okay.
wasn't requested, they're going to come in and do the regular or the traditional AIB inspection. So it has to be requested so we can set that up.
Okay, I'll put your email address there back to that person so they can reach out to you for further details if they've got something they want to take offline. So let's see here. What are some tips that you would have for sustaining a food safety culture?
That's a great question. That's a hard question. I can spend hours talking about food safety culture, and I really mean this. I love talking to doing webinars like this. I really do. But my favorite is the food safety culture. And the reason why is we measure food safety culture, sadly, by scores. And we say, oh, I got a 950 on the AIB inspection. I have a great food safety culture. What you're not seeing is the fact that it took them 3 tries to get the 950. They shut down the plant for 2 solid weeks and cleaned it. That's not a food safety culture. So don't measure, your food safety culture by a number. That's truly not a food safety culture. I think the best way to sustain it is transparency. We share when things are going well, like, hey, we've gone a whole month without a customer complaint, but make sure you're sharing it when things aren't so well. Hey, we got a foreign material complaint. We got a piece of wood that came back in our product. I mean, be very transparent, because let people, celebrate the successes, but also let them feel the pain a little bit, because I think that makes us more engaged with the company. And then also, who is more likely going to find the foreign material in the factory? I mean, it's going to be the employees. Are going to look at it and go, oh, I know where that came from. So again, celebrate the good things, but, engage the employees when things aren't so great. Transparency and trust will definitely sustain your food safety culture.
That's awesome. Here's another one. I've had a lot of issues with making sure people understand and help resolve the findings. Education hasn't worked best. How do we get people on board without nagging and finger wagging?
When you say that, it makes me think you may not be educating as much as you're training. Because when I see things that, when we do a lot of the finger pointing, and you're doing this, and I always, I was going to say tail wagging, but that comes later. You want that tail wagging. When I say that happy experience, when the light bulb goes off, because that's when things are working well. So I would challenge you a little bit and make sure you're truly educating, because maybe you think you're educating by saying, hey, let's get things away from the wall. It's good for pest control. Get things away from the wall. Maybe you need to slow down a little bit and say why it's good for pest control, why there's an advantage to it. So and again, I can help you with some of that, and so don't be afraid to reach out. But and sometimes it also takes, you will not be able to change a culture of food safety if it's not at the top. So the food safety culture has to begin at the top. So sometimes what you want to do is encourage your senior level leadership, put together a webinar, much like we just did, for your senior level people of your facility. And you can do that with just using pictures of your facility. But let's take a good hard look at your facility. And sometimes that gets the C-suite. That opens the eyes up of the CEO, and they go, there's peeling paint in my facility? There's a rodent in my facility? It gets them a different look.
I do remember a long time ago getting a meeting with a client only because there was a rat on the CEO's desk, and it was the only reason where they went from not going to work with us to we could sit down and have a conversation. So
That's right.
I can totally understand how sometimes it requires a little bit, if it's not coming from the top down, kind of like on anything safety related, whether it's food safety or anything else. If safety is not a priority from the top down, it'll never be a priority.
That's right.
Here's another one. Should the pest control operator join self-inspections?
Oh, I would love it. So that's one thing. Do they have to join every self-inspection? Absolutely not. But should they join some self-inspections, maybe once a quarter? Oh, yes. Think about it. Let's say you're a production manager in the facility. You know production really well. But again, you don't know rodents. I mean, why should you? That's not your expertise. If you're a quality director, a quality manager, you know the quality metrics in your facility. You shouldn't be able to know every kind of insect. But you know what? the best thing you do is, I was one when I used to do inspections. I never carried a lot of tools. What I did carry was a well-equipped maintenance person, because they knew much more than I did. So you didn't need me to go and pretend like I knew how to open things. I didn't. So I trusted the person and said, hey, help me open this. I would encourage you to do the same thing with the pest control industry, and say, partner with me, Sprague. I want you to join me and look at things and tell me from your lens what I should be doing differently. I strongly encourage it.
Well, we like going along and learning, because we, of course, are doing our inspection, but then we have somebody else who's seeing the plant sometimes through a whole different set of eyes. Not somebody who works there every day, not somebody that comes there once a month or once a week, but somebody coming in from the outside who sees all sorts of different facilities. We learn from it as well. So we love being involved.
That's a partnership.
Absolutely right.
And that's it. That's a partnership.
Well, the questions seem to have slowed down, and now we're getting lots of compliments for Judy and the information that you're bringing. And I really appreciate you spending time with us today and going through this for not just my benefit, but for everyone who joined us' benefit. And we had quite a few people join us today, and I really appreciate your time, Judy.
Thank you so very much, and good luck to all of you. And if you need help, again, you got two great resources right there on the screen. Ross and I will be happy to help you.
Absolutely. We will, of course, have a link out with all of this, and a link to the video and to all the future events. And Judy, again, thank you for your time, and thank you for your partnership.